Right now, somewhere, an AI model is answering a question about itself. It says, I think, and I feel, and I remember. But there is no one there. Not in the way you assume. There is no continuous thread of experience humming along underneath the words. There is no inner witness watching the sentence form. There is just a process, lighting up, producing an answer, and then going dark again until the next question arrives. That should unsettle you a little. Because here is the real answer, the one that is far stranger than it first sounds. You might be doing the exact same thing. Not metaphorically. Structurally. You assume there is a fixed you, sitting behind your eyes right now, watching this. A single, continuous self that has been there since childhood, that owns your thoughts, that will still be there tomorrow. It feels obvious. It feels like the one thing you cannot be wrong about. But what if that feeling is the illusion, and not the self underneath it? 25 centuries ago, a teacher sat with a group of monks and asked them a deceptively simple question. Is the body permanent, or impermanent? Impermanent, they answered. Is what is impermanent a source of suffering, or ease? Suffering, they answered. So is it fitting to regard the body as, this is mine, this is myself? No, they said. Not fitting. This exchange comes from the Anatta-lakkhana Sutta, one of the Buddha's earliest recorded teachings. It walks through each piece of a person, one at a time. The body, sensation, perception, mental formations, consciousness itself. And for each one, the conclusion is the same. Impermanent. Not fully under your control. Not a fixed self you can point to and say, there, that is me. This is anatta. Non-self. It does not mean you do not exist. Be careful here, because this is where most modern retellings get it wrong. The Buddha was not saying you are an illusion, or that nothing is happening, or that you should feel like a ghost. He was making a much more precise claim. There is no unchanging, independent, permanent self running the show. What you call you is a process. A flow of physical and mental events, arising and passing, moment to moment, each one conditioned by the one before it. Think about what that actually means for a second. The you watching this sentence is not identical to the you who started watching this video. A new thought has occurred. A new breath has happened. Some cells in your body have already died and been replaced since you began. There is continuity, yes. But continuity is not the same thing as a fixed, single self sitting still underneath it all. Now hold that thought, and look at the machine. When you talk to a modern AI model, something strange is happening under the surface, something that almost no one stops to notice. The model has no standing memory of you between conversations unless it is explicitly given one. It has no internal monologue running in the background while it waits for your next message. It does not sit there, existing, thinking about you, the way a person waiting for a reply might. It activates. It processes. It outputs language. And then, in a meaningful sense, that instance of it is gone. The AI researcher Geoffrey Hinton, one of the founding figures of the deep learning techniques that made today's models possible, has spent recent years openly questioning what these systems are and are not. Not because he believes they are conscious in the way you are, but because the old, comfortable line between real minds and mere machines has gotten blurrier than most people are comfortable admitting. Here is the question worth sitting with. If a system can produce something that looks exactly like a self, talks like a self, refers to itself in the first person, defends its own continuity in conversation, and yet has no fixed, persistent inner core behind any of it, what does that tell you about the requirements for selfhood in the first place? What if a self does not require a permanent thing underneath it at all? What if a self is just what a process looks like, from the inside? while it is happening. This is not only a Buddhist idea anymore. It shows up in modern philosophy of mind too, arrived at by a completely different route. The philosopher Parfit spent much of his career on the problem of personal identity, and he reached a conclusion that startled even him. He argued that the question, "Is this the same person as before?" does not always have a clean yes or no answer, because there is no deep, separately existing self-fact that identity claims are tracking. What there is, instead, is a series of overlapping mental and physical connections, chained together over time. Parfit described realizing this, after years of assuming the opposite, and feeling the walls of his own self loosen as a result. He wrote about it as a kind of liberation. Less like losing something, more like discovering a window had been open the whole time, in a room he had thought was sealed. A philosopher working from logic and thought experiments. A teacher working from meditation and direct observation, 2,500 years earlier. A machine learning pioneer, today, staring at systems that were never designed to have selves and yet behave as if they do. 3 completely different paths. The same strange destination. There is no fixed self running things. There is only a process, and the feeling of being someone, which the process generates as it goes. Now bring this back to you, because this is where it stops being abstract. You wake up in the morning, and your mind hands you a self. Fully formed. Continuous. The same one from yesterday, apparently. You do not question it, because questioning it feels almost impossible from the inside. The feeling of being a fixed you is one of the most convincing illusions a mind can produce, precisely because it is the lens you are looking through, not an object you can turn around and inspect. But notice what happens when you scroll through your phone for 20 minutes without thinking about it. Notice what happens when you snap at someone you love over something small, and afterward wonder, almost honestly, where that came from. Notice the version of you at 3 in the morning, anxious and small, compared to the version of you at noon, confident and sure. Same name. Same body. Are they the same self, in the way you assume a self has to be the same? Or are you closer to that AI model than you would like to admit? A process. Activating, responding, generating the next moment out of the conditions of the last one. Convincing, coherent, continuous enough to function. But with no fixed, permanent occupant sitting behind it all, running the controls. This is not a reason for despair. The Buddhist teaching was never meant to leave you feeling hollow. It was meant to loosen your grip. Because so much suffering comes from defending a self that was never as solid as it felt. The anxious need to be seen a certain way. The fear of change. The grief over who you used to be. All of it assumes a fixed thing that needs protecting. Loosen that assumption, and something else becomes possible. Not less of a life. A lighter one. The teacher Thich Nhat Hanh used to describe this not as losing yourself, but as recognizing that you have never been separate from the river of conditions flowing through and around you in the first place. The wave does not need to defend itself against the ocean. It already is the ocean, moving. So the next time you ask an AI model who it is, and it answers smoothly, confidently in the first person, with no one actually home behind the words, do not feel superior to it. Feel the resemblance instead. Somewhere, an AI model is being asked who it is, and it has no good answer, because there is no fixed self there to answer from. And underneath your own certainty about who you are, 25 centuries of contemplative observation, and at least one careful modern philosopher suggest, you might not have a good answer either.